Welcome to Women in VR and AR. Please welcome your panelists, Julie Young and Jenn Duong.
Oh man.
Hi, everyone.
There's a lot more people here. How's the NASA talk, guys? Did you guys not get in?
Hi, welcome to Women in VR and AR. My name is Julie Young. I'm a producer at a company called Emblematic Group. We have lots of Emblematic Group employees in the audience tonight. Emblematic Group is a really small content creator here in Santa Monica. And I'm also a co-founder of Shift.
Cool, and my name is Jenn Duong, and I am the director of virtual reality over at a company called 1215 Creative. We are a creative agency and a production company based out of Silver Lake, and I'm the other co-founder of Shift.
So thank you guys all for coming here. We really appreciate you putting us ahead of NASA. So
yes, Julie, we got this. I just don't want to mess it up, sorry. So we're the co-founders of Shift, and a little bit of backstory about Julie and I, and a little backstory about Shift. Shift is an organization that's all about shaping holistic inclusion in future tech. And Julie and I actually met in a really funny way. For those of you who don't know me, I am a huge Taylor Swift fan. I love Taylor Swift. I love Game of Thrones. I can talk your ear off about both. And Julie and I were following each other on Twitter. And Julie retweeted a Taylor Swift lyric. And this is when I was first getting into VR. So I was like going down my timeline. I'm like, oh my God. There's a girl that retweeted Taylor Swift, and she works in VR. We have to be friends. We have to meet. So I reached out. I direct messaged her, and I think my message actually said, 1, you retweeted Taylor Swift. 2, you work in VR. 3, can we be friends?
See, actually, the part she's leaving out about the story is that I was in Singapore for work, and she's like, hey, like, I saw you're in Singapore. Do you want me to pick you up from the airport? And I was like, so she didn't.
I live really close to LAX, and I thought I was trying to be friendly. I didn't think it was creepy.
Yeah, definitely.
But hey, look at us now. We have started an organization together, and we're in Women in VR together, and we're pretty much glued to the hip.
She ended up not picking me up from the airport, but we then met at a party.
Yeah, we were still friends. We were still friends. It's okay. My feelings weren't hurt. And so when Julie and I finally met, she pretty much was telling me about all the amazing things she was doing in VR with women. There was a group called Virtual Reality Girls that was started by Paisley and Ashley Pinnock and Julie. And I was so inspired. Like, I don't think I would be where I am today had I not met Julie. And I tell her this all the time because I realized at that point, I'm like, we have this amazing opportunity to make a difference because this medium is so new. And so Julie and I started talking more, hanging out more. We were hosting wine nights at her house for women, and I realized, like, after going to San Francisco, after going to New York, there were really strong women groups in San Francisco and New York. They were all emerging and all coming up, as well as LA. But there was no way for us to all talk. There was no way for me to hit up someone in New York and be like, hey, what are you working on? Apart from email, Facebook message, or giving them the old traditional phone call. And so we looked at Facebook, and we're like, how can we connect all of these women together? We live in the 21st century. We should be able to do this. Turns out Facebook groups are really great for that. So we started this thing, and it really skyrocketed off. It became a great resource for women. Women were using it to collaborate, to meet with each other, to get feedback on projects, to borrow cameras, and it really just became a resource. And that's what brought us to this. Oh, just kidding. Back to Shift. It's what brought us back to Shift because Julie and I realized this Facebook group in its own way has been such a powerful thing. It's connected thousands of people together. But how can we take it a step further? How can we go a step deeper and actually make sure we're activating change? Because it's one thing to post a photo of a panel full of men and be like, there's no men. And to get someone to reach out and to be like, oh, well, here's the organizer. Like, that's one thing. But it's another thing to actually see a shift in the gender ratios in tech. So we were thinking, how can we do that? And we realized it has to go beyond a Facebook group. We needed an official arm, an organization that can actually do things legally. So that's where we came up with the idea for Shift. Some of our Shift team's actually here. I know Sarah Stevenson is in the audience. Helen Situ couldn't be here. And then Ashna is up at Oculus, but we kind of all got together and made something that I actually think is really special, and I hope you guys can see why I think it's special. And on that note, let's get this started.
Okay, so when we were first, sat down and we said, okay, we need to give a talk about women in VR or feminism in general. That's a really big topic, and we knew that there were going to be, all kinds of different audience members. Women in VR, women who want to get into VR, women who have been in VR for a long time, and also men who have companies in VR, men who want to get into VR. So we're covering a lot of different topics today. First, we're going to go over some words that we all should know. Second, we're going to go over gender equality in VR and AR. Third, Jen's going to talk about gender diversity in storytelling and how that shapes worldview. Then fourth, we're going to give some solid action steps for VR companies. And five, how to get more involved.
Awesome. So here we go.
Okay, so the first topic is some words we should all know. Okay, feminist. This is a very, very heated word. A lot of people, it's a very misunderstood word. A lot of people don't actually know what it means. Is there anybody who wants to volunteer a definition for the word feminist? Yes.
Someone who believes in gender equality.
Okay. Anyone else? No one else has a, okay. You don't count. This is the godmother of virtual reality sitting right here and also my boss. So, okay, well, we can move on. A feminist is a person who believes in the social, political, and economic equality of the sexes. A feminist literally just believes that men and women are equal. It doesn't mean, a feminist is not necessarily a woman. A feminist is not necessarily a man. A feminist is not somebody who believes that men are less than women. It's just somebody who believes that they're the same. And that was an exact definition taken from the Beyonce song. If any of you recognized it, it's from Flawless. So just thought I'd point that out. Because if we're going to choose a definition for feminists, we might as well use Beyonce's. But yeah, so it's a very, very misunderstood word, and we just thought it would be great to open that up and clarify it. That said, everyone is invited to be a part of it. Everyone needs to be a part of it. We've come a very long way as women in this world, but still, the vast majority of companies, countries, and organizations are run by men. And men need to know that they're invited to be a part of this discussion, and they need to be. If we want to have change and we want to move to a world where 50% of our companies are run by women and 50% of our households are run by men, we need everyone on board. That said, I think one of the other really common misconceptions about feminism is that it's a rule book, but it's not. So I really like this quote from Tavi Gevinson. It's feminism is not a rule book, but a discussion, a conversation, a process. I find a lot of times when people are debating about feminism, they want to say, this is right and this is wrong, and this should be this way and this should be that way. But the reality is that sometimes these things aren't easy. Sometimes they are very, very complicated situations. And being a part of feminism means that you're being a part of that discussion, and you care about that discussion, and you want to positively collaborate with other people. It doesn't mean there's a rule book.
So on that note, another really hot buzzword that's used a lot of times is privilege. We hear it all the time. White male privilege, white privilege, various types of privilege. It's a little ridiculous. But the thing about privilege that we have to recognize is not everyone comes from the same background, and not everyone has the same opportunity. So at the end of the day, it's not that you did anything wrong. It's not that I did anything wrong. We just have to acknowledge that we come from different backgrounds. But where privilege becomes wrong is the moment that we deny this fact. And a lot of people online, especially on social media, they'll deny that fact. So keep that in mind.
Privilege essentially means that you wouldn't be where you are today if you were a woman, non-white, LGBTQ, or fill in the blank. And born into a situation that puts you at a disadvantage to others. And I think that's, we all have some form of that in some way.
Exactly. So my note to all of you guys, and not only all of you guys, but I feel like Julie and I take responsibility in this too, but But we have to. It's not an option, guys. We have to check our privilege. We cannot continue to make assumptions as to why people are where they are in their careers, as to why this person makes that amount of money, or why they aren't at the C level yet. You have to check your privilege. And that's something that I know sounds harsh because there's a negative connotation behind it, but it doesn't have to be. It's an opportunity for us to open our minds and to realize that we're all different, but that's what makes us unique, and that's what makes humanity this beautiful, crazy, kind of chaotic thing that it is. And then on that note, 2 other words that I think are incredibly important for us to have a constructive, positive conversation around, diversity and inclusion in VR are the actual words diversity and inclusion. So many of us know that diversity is the quality or state of having many different forms, types, ideas, etc., different things, right? That's why we'll say like, oh, that's very diverse, blah, 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 because there's different things. They're not all uniform. And inclusion is the action or state of including or being included in a group or in something. Now, does anyone know why I might want to bring up these 2 definitions separately? All right. Oh. Exactly. A lot of oh, what did he say?
He said a lot of people think they're the same thing.
Yeah.
She said a lot of people think they're the same thing.
But that's the thing. People do think that they're the same thing, and this brings me to my big point. Diversity and inclusion are not synonymous. And where we fall into a pit hole is when we start thinking that they are. Because if you think about it this way, if you have a diverse group, but no sense of inclusion, at the end of the day, you just happen to have a bunch of individuals that are all in the same area, but can still get siloed into their own cliques and cliches because there's not an inclusive sense of environment, right? But if you have an inclusive group, but no diversity, you essentially have all these people that are like, yeah, dude, totally, oh my God, yeah, but they're all the same. You're not getting any diverse perspectives. So that's where the problem is. But the moment that you recognize that they're 2 completely separate things is the moment where you can go, wait, if I have a diverse group, and at my core principles, I start having this idea of inclusion and opening opportunities and opening a dialogue with everyone, that's when you can start to activate real change. So this brings us to gender equality in VR and AR. And specifically for this talk, why is feminism important for VR? It kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. We're at a unique time. It's not very often that new industries emerge. And VR started kind of in the 80s and 90s. There was that big flop with Nintendo, and then it died off a little bit, and then Nani and Palmer kind of brought it back, and now we're at the second wave of VR. We're in 2016. A lot of people consider this the first year of VR because consumer headsets are out. Do you know what that means? It means that the next 18 months are critical, absolutely critical to ensure that diversity, inclusion, and equality are cornerstones of this industry. And when you think about it, VR is really the intersection of tech and entertainment. So here are some stats. For those of you guys who don't know, women make up 56% of the working force in the United States, and of those tech jobs, only 25% are women. And we're going to look at our sister industry, film, and you're going to find that there is a 5-to-1 ratio for men working in film to women. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into those statistics. But it goes back to what I was saying. If VR is the intersection of these 2 industries, and if we don't change now, if we don't take the opportunity to activate change and to fix this, this is what we're going to continue to see. And we're going to see VR turn into Hollywood 2.0, into Games 2.0, and into Tech 2.0. And for those of you who have seen me on panels or have heard my podcast, I've said it before, and I'll say it again because I mean it, and I know Julie means it. We would rather die before we see VR turn into those things. So we, as well
VR is not going to suck.
Yeah. We are going to do everything that we can to make sure that that doesn't happen. So that's kind of something that we've decided we're going to dedicate our lives to, and here we go.
No, and again, I mean, a lot of these companies that are emerging right now, these startups, they have the potential to become the next Google or Facebook. And the reality is if they have at least one woman, like a C-level woman right now, that's going to massively change what the world will look like. You know, it's just like, a recent CS grad is probably not going to want to go work at a company where there's 5 men in charge. You know, but if there's at least 1 woman, we have the opportunity to really change the way the whole workforce looks. And that's huge. And especially for, something like VR, which is the most powerful thing that humans have ever dealt with at this point, except for AI, but we won't go there right now. Okay, so I'm a huge numbers person. If anyone who knows me, I love being in spreadsheets, I love finance, I love the stock market, I love everything. So when we first started getting into feminism, I was like, I want some real solid facts. And I'm just saying, science says women are awesome. Like, literally, that's what it says. This is a quote taken from a joint study done by Sheryl Sandberg, who's the COO of Facebook, which, of course, owns Oculus, and also Adam Grant, who is a professor at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. If you don't follow Adam Grant on Facebook, you absolutely should. He's a genius. Just some stats. Startups led by women are more likely to succeed. Innovative firms with more women in top management are more profitable. Companies with more gender diversity have more revenue, customers, market share, and profits. A comprehensive analysis of 95 studies on gender differences showed that when it comes to leadership skills, although men are more confident, women are more competent. And the world is a better place. They didn't say that part. I said that part. If you're interested in this research, I think it's a really important part of understanding this issue. So email me at julie@shift.world, and I will send it to you. Okay, so the next thing, what's going on in the women in VR community right now? Probably most of you are involved in some sort of way, but for those of you who aren't, I'll just give you a brief recap. So, as Jen mentioned, we have this huge Facebook group, which has turned, honestly, into a monster. I wake up thinking about this Facebook group, and I go to bed thinking about this Facebook group, and I get notifications about this Facebook group probably 70 times a day. Yep. We have 3,400 members right now, and we vet every single person, and we keep the ratio to about 80% women and 20% men. We work really hard to ensure that it's a really positive environment where everyone feels included, everyone feels like they can have a conversation.
And on that quick note, I know one of those things is, as Julie has said, this has turned into a monster. Like, it's a lot. It's a lot, and I just want to give a shout out to 2 of the people who are helping us that I know are here. Actually 3 that are helping us kind of keep this on board. We have admins that aren't a part of Shift, so thank you, Ella, thank you, Ashley, and shout out to
Jasmine.
Sarah. Or Jasmine.
Are there any other here?
Is Ashley here?
I don't think so.
Awesome, okay. You guys, awesome.
Woo! So with that, there are a lot of groups that have had, women in VR initiatives, and you should know about all of them. VRG, Mad Women VR, and AR VR Women, as well as our organization, Shift. All of these organizations are doing a number of different things, largely around community building, bringing people together, promoting resources, and also having workshops. This picture here is from the workshop we actually did with VRLA yesterday and Girls Who Code. Which brought how many? I think 20?
22?
22 women ages 13 to 18 for a beginner's Unity class, which was really awesome. In general, the men of VR have been totally fucking awesome. Like, no, seriously, this is a round of applause for the men of VR. I'm sorry that I used the word fucking in a presentation, but it's really necessary for this point. I really have a lot of faith that VR won't end up like every technology before it, because I think we're really at a point in the course of humanity where men care and people care, and this has been proven time and time again in our community. Of course, there's always going to be Reddit trolls and Gamergate and things like that, but overall, the men have just been really, really supportive of this initiative. And where's Ben? Ben. Hi. Ben, we met Ben this morning at around 9 a.m. on the internet. And he posted this in the Women in VR group, and I messaged him, and I was like, Ben, can I put this in our presentation? So I just wanted to show, Ben is one of the many people who has just been openly supportive of these initiatives. Says, as a gay Latino Jew, I deeply understand the importance of inclusion in male-dominated spaces. This group represents a vital but often ignored portion of the tech arena, NASA. And I'm proud to support it in any way that I can. So shout out to Ben and all of the men of VR. This is another really great point from John Voorhees. I might be butchering the pronunciation of his name, who I don't think is here. Raise your hand if you are here. Okay. He's the CEO and founder of Primitive.io. And he posted this yesterday in the group, where basically he had been playing a game and his avatar was a woman. And his avatar had been catcalled, essentially. And he said, as a man, it is one thing to witness objectification externally. I have been with friends when they are catcalled and I empathize. To experience it from first person is completely different. It is jarring to have lived an entire life where making strong eye contact is so natural to me that it goes unnoticed, and then to feel the salacious intent toward the body that is attached to me. I literally felt cheapened, like everything that I am was being reduced to my outward appearance, and that by expressing a sexual desire, these men were also exerting power and status over me. I mean, this is huge. That a man would post this in the group and just say, you know, I'm just feeling this, and I just want to share this. And we had a really, really great, productive conversation around it. And it also sheds light on the fact that, you know, VR is going to do some pretty unbelievable things to the world, and this is just one of them. You know, I'm sure we're all tired of hearing, like, VR is an empathy machine, but it really is, and, you know, we're only going to see more of this.
All right, so switching gears a little bit, I want to talk about storytelling in VR. Storytelling is very important to me. It's something that I've kind of always aspired to be. It's something that I've always surrounded myself with peers who are storytellers. So really excited to be working in this medium with so many talented people. We have been telling stories since the beginning of time. Since we were in the caveman eras, we painted on walls, and then we continue to tell stories through various mediums such as literature, painting, theater, and performance-based stuff, music. That's all storytelling. And then a couple thousand years down the road, we get this crazy thing called film, and people are like watching people do weird stuff on boxes that animate. It's bizarre. And now in 2016, we are at virtual reality. And the really cool thing about storytelling that I realized a while ago was storytelling is world building. So we have built thousands and thousands of worlds for thousands of years. And now we have the power to build worlds like never before with VR, because we're actually building worlds, especially if you're building interactive worlds. That rock on the ground, you made that asset. It is there. That is now part of the world. If you're doing a 360 video, that chair or the lamp in the corner, that is now a part of the world that you have created. And that being said, there's some interesting things that I want to share with you guys. So I wanted to look at underrepresented speaking characters that are series regulars and lead roles on recurring media platforms. And what's really interesting is if you look across all of this data that was done by USC Annenberg, you're going to find that less than 30% of underrepresented groups have speaking roles that are lead roles and reoccurring roles. And if you think this is bad, just wait. Let's look at our sister industry. Let's look at film. These are the stats for female writers in entertainment across the board. Kind of crazy. For film, we have 89.2% are male writers, with only 10.8% that are female writers. And it gets progressively better as we go to broadcast, and then cable, it kind of drops, and then streaming, it kind of drops. This isn't pretty, I don't think. I don't think anyone would agree it's pretty. But if you think this is bad, let's look at directors. Wow, look at that. Look at female directors in film. We now have 96.6% male directors and 3.4% female directors.
It's a good thing they're not shaping the way the stories are told.
I mean, just a little bit. So the whole point about this is when we think about it, when we tell stories from unique perspectives, from our own individual experiences. And that means that those are the types of stories that we're putting out there, but what those stories do is incredibly interesting. they shape our worldview. And so when I see two of the major creative forces in entertainment, it's predominantly men, it worries me a little bit, because when I think about storytelling, the moment that there's too much uniformity around storytelling, it's the moment it becomes dangerous because of, oh, just kidding. Apparently I don't know my slides. But it becomes dangerous. And the reason why, now I can go to this, is because virtual reality is a universal medium. And what I mean by that is it is a universal language that we all can speak, especially as VR content developers. And that being said, we have to recognize that this medium no longer addresses a specific group. It's not just for the gamers. It's not just for the tech enthusiast, the tech evangelist. And it's not for the bro people that are all like, oh yeah, man, like we're on the cutting edge of everything. It's not it. This is a universal medium with a universal audience. And guess what? Women make up half of that audience. So that brings me to diversity and women in storytelling. Back to what I was saying about there being too much uniformity behind storytelling, what happens in terms of worldviews is the world begins to be presented through a singular view, a world perspective from a dominant culture that isn't reflective upon everyone. So to all the women storytellers out there and minorities storytellers out there, the people that want to tell stories, I want you to know this. You can do it. And do you know why? It's because VR is a medium that you can and you will thrive in if you want it.
Thanks. Woo! I mean, I think the reality is with Hollywood is just that this tiny city of Los Angeles has so much influence on the entire world. And you know, when little girls go to the movies and they can't see their gender being represented as superheroes or
Exactly.
you know,
like
doctors or anything like that, if they're constantly represented as an object of men, that's going to shape what they aspire to do. And with VR, it's going to be the same thing unless we change it.
Exactly. Julie and I actually talked about this pretty extensively. Stories are inspiring. So when these girls are looking to these stories to be inspired, they're not going to aspire to any of that because they're not going to see themselves there. We generally don't pursue careers that we can't see ourselves thriving in, and we need to change that. So we have the opportunity to change that now, and I hope that all of you change it with us, because it's not just the responsibility of women, it's all of our responsibilities as humanity. I know that sounds a little bit dramatic, but being very serious. It's a serious issue.
So the next thing that we're going to cover is just action steps for VR companies, especially startups. We wanted to kind of come up with like the top 5 or 6 ways that companies can make changes right now to ensure that they're inclusive of women and diversity in general. So the first point is actively recruit women and minorities. You know, this is a huge point. You know, a lot of people come and say to us, you know, it's so hard to find qualified women and qualified minorities. And I know that. We all know it. It's not going to be easy. I really like this graphic from STEMwomen.net. It says, not only is there a leaky pipeline in STEM, the plumbing itself is broken. And you know what this means, probably the number one thing that people say to me is exactly that. You know, I want to have more women in my company, but I just can't find them. And we're trying to recruit, but it's just really hard. And yeah, it's going to be really hard, but we have to recognize that the system is very broken. You know, from the first day that we're born into this world, we are ascribed a gender. And if you are a baby, you are put in pink clothes. And if you are a woman, you're put in pink clothes. And if you are a man, you are put in blue clothes. And, you know, from the very beginning, there are all kinds of studies about toys, for example. Toys that kind of promote STEM, like Legos and robot building toys and things like that. They're marketed towards boys. And women are marketed, you know, dolls and things that, you know, shopping. They're not marketed, you know, build a robot. And so we just have to recognize that this is a huge problem, and it starts at birth, and it gets worse in middle school, and then it gets even worse in high school, and it's so hard to keep women in, you know, calculus, science, engineering, any classes like that. And unfortunately, I actually hadn't seen this statistic until yesterday, but in 1984, 37% of computer science degrees went to women. In 2014, only 12% of computer science graduates were women. So we have a lot of work to do. We really have to try hard. It's not going to be easy, but like we've been saying all along, it's our responsibility. We don't want our children to grow up in a world where they say, they can't see themselves being the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. They can't see themselves being a doctor or an engineer because they're not portrayed that way and because they don't have heroes to look up to who are like them. And that's huge. And again, this is the most powerful and transformative medium of our time, except for AI. But again, not going there. And again, just want to bring up this slide again. If you work hard to actively recruit women and minorities, your company's going to do better. You're going to make more money, and it's going to be awesome. So, again, email me if you want the research links. And I just wanted to bring up this tweet by a woman named Bo Ren, who, has anybody seen her article? It was published last week, just to get a general sense. She was a PM at Facebook and is now a PM at Tumblr. And she wrote a very compelling article about what her experience was like. And I really like this quote. It says, "Ladies, for every opportunity you get for being a woman or minority, just know that you were passed up for 10 opportunities. Accept proudly." And I think that's really true, especially for women in tech. A lot of times we say, am I only on this panel because they had a female quota that they had to reach? That makes me feel shitty, But the reality is that, again, privilege, and you earned it, and fucking be on that panel. I'm proud about it.
All right, so on this note, excuse me, fun story. If you have, God, okay, I don't want to use that metaphor, just kidding. I'll just talk about this. So we wanted to talk about making diversity a part of your company culture. And we say this because at the end of the day, it goes back to that idea that diversity and inclusion are different, right? They're not synonymous. So just because you're hiring more women, just because you're hiring more people of color, because you're hiring people from the lesbian gay community, makes your company diverse, but it doesn't necessarily make your company inclusive. And that's when we actually start to see core change. And the thing is, especially at the leadership levels, we have to vocalize this. We have to voice that we are trying to make an inclusive culture at our company. Because if you don't vocalize and go I'm going to do it behind the scenes, no one's going to know. Your employees aren't going to know, and it's not going to work. So it brings me to this study. Basically, 2 professors told managers that stereotypes were common or rare. Then they asked managers to read a transcript from a job interview of a candidate described as either female or male. At the end of the interview, the candidate asked for higher compensation and non-standard bonus. When the managers read that many people held stereotypes, they were 28% less interested in hiring the female candidate. They also judged her as 27% less likable. The same information did not alter their judgment of male candidates. This isn't the only study that says this. And I think the really important fact to note is, while this is all true, they did find that all of this changed when a simple qualifier was added, such as "this is unacceptable," or "people try to change these stereotypes," which goes back to what the first slide said. We have to be vocal about it. We can't basically go out there and say, "I'm going to create an inclusive culture in my company, but I'm not going to tell anyone about it." Part of inclusion is an open dialogue. And opening that dialogue means being transparent. And it means being transparent with your employees. And it really does start with leadership. It starts at that core. So for all of you CEOs, for everyone at the C level, anyone that's at a director level or a manager level, please take this seriously. Please bring your teams together and make sure you have that open dialogue to create that inclusive culture. This is another quote from Adam Grant and Sheryl Sandberg. I don't know if you can know this or note this, but we really like Sheryl Sandberg.
I don't know if that's obvious.
We think she's great. So to motivate women at work, we need to be explicit about our disapproval of the leadership imbalance as well as our support for female leaders. So say it. I'm unhappy that most women aren't at the C level when they should be. And I think that's okay. I think we have to not be afraid to say that. And these are some really great leaders that, because they're vocal about diversity, because they're vocal about feminism, there's more diversity in their companies. We have Nani, we have Tony Parisi, Shannon Gaines, Sheryl Sandberg, we have Charles Babb and Philip Rosedale from High Fidelity.
All of these people are really outspoken feminists.
Exactly.
And people know that and feel like they can approach them.
And all of their companies are doing incredibly well. Don't know if you guys know this, but like Emblematic Group, Godmother of VR, High Fidelity, one of the top tools used for content creation. Tony Parisi, he basically made VR possible to be viewed on the web. Like, these are amazing, phenomenal people.
Okay, and the third point that I think is really, really, really important is that it's ultimately the employer's responsibility to make sure there's no pay gap. Sorry. You know, I think a lot of the advice that women get today is you need to negotiate a higher salary, you need to ask for a bonus, you need to be confident and know what your worth is. And I think that's totally true. And I tell that to all my female friends all the time. You know, go in there and ask what you're worth. But the reality is that being assertive is not a requirement for getting equal pay. I mean, that's absurd. At the end of the day, there's only one entity that can tell if there's a pay gap, and it's the employer themselves. And the employer is responsible for going through and making sure, okay, if this is, you know, these people are doing equal jobs, are they getting paid the same? And on that note, it's not really it's not the best idea to use to anchor that salary on someone's previous job, because the odds are that the woman was also being underpaid at that job. So, you know, if you hire two accountants and one was making $50,000 previously and the man was making $60,000, you should probably pay them both the same salary if they're doing the same work. I want to talk a bit about Mark Benioff, who's the CEO of Salesforce. Do people in here know what Salesforce is? Yes, definitely. I am a proud shareholder of Salesforce stock. Just putting that out there. Mark Benioff basically went through his entire company of hundreds of people, and you know, he went through all of the payroll, and he was like, you know, where is the pay gap here? And he went through and he gave over $3 million worth of pay increases to women who were doing the same jobs as men but getting paid less. And I think that this is just an incredible example of the responsibilities of employers. Again, employers are the only ones who know if there's a pay gap. So it's their job to make sure there isn't one. Point number 4, this is a really big point for VR and AR specifically. We really have to be conscious of our tendency to assume that women are not the technical ones. I think this is probably the number one kind of complaint that that women in the VR space have, is that we all do it. You know, I know that the odds are against us. I know that statistically, if there's a man in the room and there's a woman in the room, the odds of the man being the engineer are higher. I know that. But it really, really hurts women and pushes them out when we act on that, you know? You know, when you walk into a company, don't assume that the woman is the office manager or the admin. Don't assume that the man is the engineer. It can be really tough. I have my coworker Aaron, who is a super feminist, and I'm super lucky to work with him. We have very similar jobs, and we go out to these demos, and we'll just demo emblematic content together. And we both notice this, that as soon as the conversation gets technical, people start directing the questions at Aaron. And we're both equally technically illiterate, you know, more or less. We both have biz dev roles on the company, but you know, fortunately, I work with, you know, Aaron's a wonderful person to work with, and as soon as this happens, he goes, "Oh, sorry, I don't know anything. Ask Julie." And so it's, you know, it's just really important that we're all conscious of that and that we work against it, because I think this probably is the number one thing that keeps women out of STEM in general. Okay, so this one, this is about jokes about women and about sexism. It's probably better just to not make them. Like, you can make a joke about anything else. Just don't make it about women, you know, because people will take it just don't do it. And I do realize, I do acknowledge the irony of objectifying a man's appearance in a presentation about feminism. I do realize that, but you know.
I don't know, it's Trump. All right, so for those of you guys who are in the audience and that are women, you're probably wondering, I'm a woman, how can I get more involved? And so we have a couple of things. Apart from the 5 points that we just made, there's a couple ones that I want to bring up. Education, education, education. I cannot stress this enough. Julie had alluded to it earlier. A lot of companies will come to us saying, we're trying to hire qualified women, we're trying to hire qualified minorities, but they're so hard to find. And it's like, yes, let's look at why. If we look at the entry-level jobs and just even education prior to that, so higher education, university education, there are not enough women getting in at the entry-level jobs to build up their skill set and to build up their experience to be qualified for the higher level C jobs. So how do we fix this? We fix this with education. We fix this by empowering everyone with the proper tools to get your skill set, grab it, refine it, and be incredibly competitive in the job market. So that way, regardless of your sex, regardless of your racial background, regardless of everything, it just comes down to, can you do the job and can you do it well? Second point, get involved with your local communities. I know for those of you guys who aren't based in LA, you may go, it's really hard, the VR community is really small, I don't know where it is. The thing is that's okay. Start your own meetup. I mean, it's really interesting. Like, we gave that advice to someone who was in Seattle, and she totally did it, and now she has one of the largest meetups. So shout out to Ava for those of you who know her.
Woo!
And the really cool thing about VR is it's emerging, meaning there are emerging groups in LA, in San Francisco, and now they're popping up everywhere. We're having one in Austin, Texas, I know is one, Boston, as well as Chicago, Seattle, New York, DC. They're literally everywhere. So get involved with your local community, and if you don't have a local community, make one. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I know this is something that we're told time and time again, that there are no stupid questions, but there really aren't any stupid questions. You're going to meet a lot of people in VR that are going to call themselves experts. And they're going to be like, oh, I spoke on a panel, I'm an expert. We'll say this.
Lol.
Julie and I have both been in VR for a while. We are by no means experts. The experts are the people who really started this research in the 80s and the 90s and who have dedicated their entire lives to it. We're in a second wave of VR where there's a lot of people working in VR and who have extensive knowledge, but at the end of the day, we're all still figuring it out. So don't be afraid to ask questions, because there's no question that is too stupid. Cool. We'll wrap this up really quickly. The last one is just do it. And the reason why I say just do it is because oftentimes people will tell me, I'm not going to do it because I'm afraid. I don't know how. But if we let that fear of failure stop us from even trying, we fail by default. And the thing for VR to succeed, if we want that, we all have to succeed. So if you have something that you want to make, get out there and just do it. And we just wanted to thank you guys for coming to our presentation. Sorry.